Hello, and welcome back to Purposeful Woman podcast. Today we have an awesome Tanya Targett Camacho, often referred as a media darling. Tanya is the former investigative news journalist turned video, speaking, and media strategist. She created a six-figure revenues in her first 6 months, and then multiple six figures in the revenues within the first 3 years. Tanya students span 12 countries and have generated over 7.4 million in free publicity, appearing in New York Times, Forbes, Huffington Post, and Fox, to name a few. She is on the mission to change lives through power of story. Hi and welcome, Tanya.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me here. And it was six figures in 18 months, the six figure.
So. Even better.
Yeah.
Love that. All right. So we would love to hear, how did you do it? What is your story?
Yeah, well, I was actually selling from stage, which is something I never wanted to do. I thought that only sort of those kind of used car salesman type people sold from stage. Like, it just made my skin cringe. And one day I found myself living on welfare. I was living in a beautiful house on the waterfront in the morning. And by the afternoon, I was living in a house not even in my own name. And I was on welfare. And I had about 6 weeks rent left in the bank. And I needed to do something really, really different to feed my daughter. And the tears and the fears would wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And fortunately, someone wanted what I had, which I'm a former investigative news journalist and award-winning journalist. And they wanted me to teach them how to get on TV and in primetime magazines and newspapers. And they said, look, if you teach me how to do this, I'll teach you how to sell from stage. And I said, no, thanks. And I walked away. And I know, right? I'm so blessed. They came back 2 weeks later and they said, Tanya, I want to talk to you again about swapping. And I now had 4 weeks rent left in the bank. And I went, all right, I'll try it. And it changed my life. Even though the first time I spoke as a keynote speaker in front of a room of like 73 people, I broke down into tears. And Viktoriia, I'm not talking about those kind of attractive, beautiful Hollywood tears. I'm talking about can't catch my breath, quivering chin, ugly faced, embarrassing tears. But fortunately, people connected with me. And a couple of weeks later, because I was selling from stage, I sold into a small, low-priced $47 workshop. And at that workshop, I sold into a $2,500 workshop at that point in time. And I sold $12,500 in just a few hours. And you couldn't wipe the smile off my face for 3 weeks because I had been living on $125 a week with my daughter. So $12,500 was going to look after food for the entire year.
Oh my gosh, that is such a wonderful story. I remember myself just not even going on a stage first, but I raised my hand at Tanya Robbins event, and it was like 5,000 people, and I couldn't answer even questions. I was so embarrassed, but that's what really drove me to do that even more. I so admire people who can sell from stage and speak on stages. Well, we are having our own stages right now. So what will be your advice? No, let's go back to the mistakes first. What will be your mistake that you wish you could avoid it? Of course, we don't regret about them, but like, what would that one that you wish you could avoid it?
Well, I think, when I was invited to learn how to sell from stage, I'd already sold from stage, or thought I had, because I'd already, as a journalist, I'd been pretty high profile, and I'd spoken down the front of the room. And then as a publicist, I'd spoken down the front of the room, and I tried to sell people into products, and it didn't work. And everyone would always come up to me and go, oh, you're such a great speaker. You're so inspirational. You're so motivational. But no one was motivated to open their wallets. And so when I was offered that chance to sell from stage, I thought to myself, I've been there and I've done that. And so I judged myself on my past failures or lack of success, rather than, going, okay, well, just because that didn't work doesn't mean it wouldn't work, going forward. And, I sold in Australia alone over $750,000 from stage on that one talk before I even moved to America. So, for me, imagine what I would have missed out on, or imagine what your viewers, listeners are missing out on, because you have these ripple effects, right? So when you go and speak on stage, other people see you and they want to book you. And it literally took me from Australia to America. And then I was speaking on stage in Palm Springs and I spotted this sexy Latin handsome man in the audience, and I'm now married to him living in America.
That is awesome. Okay, so what would be your number one advice that you could give to anyone who is starting speaking, selling from stage?
My number one advice would be, firstly, to give yourself permission to share your story. So, I look at the power of stories, and it's not that all stories are shared equally too. So what we need to do when we're selling from stage, my number one advice would be, how do you need to connect to your audience? What are the objections that they might be thinking? So we want to show resonance and empathy. What we want to do is we want to go back in our history. We want to have a look at some of those stories and our turning points in our journey. Now, you might be thinking, and a lot of people do this, well, Tanya, I haven't had that kind of personal crisis. I don't have a great story. But you can't judge your story and compare it to someone else's, because when you do share your story, and that is truly the only thing that's unique to us is our story, because we may have all trained with the same coaches, we may have been to the same colleges or universities. The one thing that defines us is our story. But it's pulling the right pieces of the story and making sure that you don't do a Tanya and that you don't share parts of your story before you've healed. So when I was sharing a little bit of my story from stage the first time, I hadn't healed from some of what I was sharing. And so the vulnerability turned into a potential disaster. So picking those elements of your story to create vulnerability, to set you aside and create uniqueness, but also that helps, doesn't harm your message. You want to offset that vulnerability with some credibility.
I love that. I love that. It's also one of my mentors says, and you just said almost perfectly the same. Don't reveal what you haven't healed. And it just like stuck in my brain before too. And it's just so powerful, so powerful. But how do people start then if they don't think that do have a story? So where to find that story? What would be the places to go back, or what do you think it's working?
That's a really great question. So when you're selling from stage, you have a combination of two things primarily. So you're going to share some content, but then you also want to kind of wrap that content in some story aspects. And sometimes an easy way to find your story is to actually have a look at your knowledge and go, well, how do I know that? How do I know that? Where did I learn that? And keep going back and keep asking that same question. When I do story hunting sessions with my clients, because I work privately with people on writing their signature talks, I take them all the way back and I'll say to them, where were you born? Did you live in different countries? Well, you might think, well, why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant because it shows that you've had to rebuild, that you've had to pivot, right? And that can be really important depending on what your audience is that you're listening to. And I'll say, okay, well, now take me through your whole life, and you're going to mind map this. You're not going to use all of this, but if you don't write down each of those points, it's like a filing cabinet. If you don't write down everything that comes into your mind and you go, oh no, and you censor it and you go, oh no, that's not relevant, you won't get to the piece behind. So use something like MindMeister or a whiteboard, or even just, an old-fashioned pen and paper, and go through it. Like, for instance, if I go through my childhood, I think about, was I good in school? Did I do well in school? Was I popular in school? I wasn't popular in school. I was a little black duck. I didn't fit in. That's a really important part, because a lot of people that I work with are little black ducks that didn't fit in. So that's going to create connection. If I didn't go back to being a white-haired kid with a British accent moving to Australia who skipped 2 grades of school, and so then I was bullied, if I didn't go back that far, I wouldn't be able to access that. And I go right the way through high school too. And so I take my clients, and I encourage you to do this, to go all the way through and just look for challenges that you had, turning points that you had, and struggles that you had, and triumphs, so that you can access all of these little elements of stories. And then what you'll do is you'll link them.
And I have my last question. what you're sharing is just so valuable, and I believe there is already so much that people can take out and walk away with. And we have a last question that I always ask in our podcast, that it's the same, and I want you to fill in the blank. And it sounds like it. If you really knew me, you will know that I am
ferocious.
Yes, I love it.
Yes,
Ferocious. Thank you so much. So how our audience can find you and how they can tap into the stories with
well,
you?
I have, if you're looking to get booked to speak and you want to find out more about how to develop your story, I have a free gift for everybody, Viktoriia. When you're looking to get booked to speak, to sell from stage, you need a media one sheet. And so do you need me to share that link with you? Do you want me to say the link?
I'll add the link in the section below, in the description.
Okay.
You can share it however it sounds like.
And you can also, so that's a bit.ly, so bit.ly/media number one sheet. So that's a one pager, and you can use that to get booked on TV and on stage as well. And you can also connect with me on Instagram, Tanya Targett Camacho, and you can connect with me on Facebook through my video speaking and publicity Facebook group.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sunny. Thank you for coming on. And as always, don't forget to text +1 401 399 4105 to stay in tune with Purposeful Community. And I'll see you in the next episode tomorrow. Bye. And if you love this episode and you would love to see more of that, click the subscribe button to Purposeful Woman Podcast. And don't forget to text us to stay in tune with the Purposeful Community for awesome tricks by texting to number +1 401 399 4105. And we will link descriptions in the episode to all of that we mentioned today. Bye. Turn your one day to day one with a purposeful day.